So we always want to make sure that we are recognizing and supporting that Baker Ripley and Gulf Coast Workforce Solutions are funding today's training. If you ever have any questions about how to get your training certificate or when you're going to get anything about the training certificate itself, please make sure that you reach out to uh, Workforce Solutions Gulf Coast because I won't be able to help you. Uh, every training, every session, I always get a half dozen folks that about a week later start sending me emails. I do my best if I can, but since I don't have any input on the actual processing of your training certificate, please make sure you reach out to them. However, what I will do, and I will remind you, is that I am absolutely here to answer any questions about the content. So at the end of the session today, you will get my email address. You are always welcome to call me about content. The other thing that I just kind of real quick want to remind everybody is that about a little over an hour and a half in is when I will post for the first time the QR code or the link. I'll do both during the session. So know that I don't drop it early and I want you to be here for it. So remember that you've got 48 hours to submit your survey so that Workforce can get you your training certificate. So, all right. Well, we got about half the folks that are registered here, so I am going to go ahead and get us started. So today we are going to um, kind of continue our leadership series. We're going to talk specifically about knowing yourself as a leader, as a boss, as a manager, as a director, because you know what? We're only going to get better at doing this job the more we know about ourselves. One of the things that I like to remind all of you, and hopefully you do understand and kind of recall, that the last time I checked, probably most of you, I would say out of the 29 folks on, I would suspect that probably about 26 of you were not actually trained to do this job before you got into the job. And probably even a higher number of probably closer to 29 got into childcare because you love children and that was where your passion lied. And that nowhere along the lines did you go, I want to play with numbers or I want to have to manage people that are taller than 3 feet tall. Like that was not something you woke up one day and said, that's what I want to do. So, as part of that, I just want you to remember that the more you know about yourself, the more you're going to be able to really feel like you have total control of this role. Because if you guys are anything like I was when I was a director, even before you had your first cup of coffee at work, before you unlocked the door, the weight of leadership was there because somebody had already called you. Now somebody might have sent you 13 messages or left you voicemails or sent you texts. And that's coming from the parents, that's coming from your staff. And so, the whole feeling of leadership is just one of those things that, you know, you might even be one of those people who go to workshops like this one, right? And you read books and you keep going, why is this so hard? Well, it's not necessarily that it's hard. It's one of those things that every one of us are going to lead differently. And that's what we're going to talk about today. All the different ways people lead naturally and how to embrace that and how to get more out of your natural skills. But because we all lead differently, sometimes there's going to be things that we do really, really well. And then there's going to be things that we just don't do well. And we have choices. We either learn and adapt and we develop those skills, but recognize they aren't our strongest things that we do. Or we build a team with the missing pieces. And that's actually one of my favorite parts about leadership is that we don't have to do it by ourselves. Now, we have a lot of owner directors on the call today and y'all wear a different set of hats. So if you have not already dropped in the chat, if you're an owner, a director, an owner director, I think we've even got a couple of professors that have jumped on. If you've got, maybe you're an assistant director, maybe you're a lead teacher thinking about being an owner. All of those are okay. But if you can drop that in the chat for me, that would be great. That's a great place for us to kind of start today's conversation. So the next thing I'd love to have you do in the chat is tell me what maybe already happened today that caused you to, I don't know, think about what it is that you like or don't like about being in charge, about being part of the leadership team at your program. So if you want to drop that in the chat for me, that'd be great. What are some things that you love or maybe don't love about being in leadership at your program? Oh, come on now. I see you there. I love all the smiling faces, but engagement's easier when we're all actually engaging. Uh-oh. The call outs. Somebody knew how to find me really quick. So I do not like playing the principal role. Oh, yeah. Oh, Lisa, that's a great point. If I don't come back to that, will you remind me? Somebody wants to remind me that Lisa doesn't like playing the principal for children who misbehave. And that's an absolute, I totally get that, especially when sometimes you're like, it's not so much the kid, but it might be the adults in the room, right? The adults need the break. Absolutely. So I liked being in charge. Oh, firing. Now, see, I liked that part. All right. But we'll definitely talk about that more today. All right. Oh, see, I was a slide ahead. All right. So you guys are all answering my question for me. What parts of leadership feel heaviest right now? Um, because one of the things that I really like to think about, and for those of you who don't know, Texas Director, I'm Kate Woodward Young with Texas Director, and Texas Director have been offering director credentialing and director focused training for over 25 years here in the state of Texas. We are homegrown and we love to be able to support the directors. But we've been teaching the whole time that as a director, you need to know four things. You need to know yourself. You can't do anything if you don't know yourself. You need to know your business. You need to know your program. And then you need to really understand your community. And so today's session is a lot about the know yourself, right? So um, if a stable leader really knows childcare and classrooms and ratios, and they know that really, really well, then they know their program. But if they don't know themselves and they don't know the business and they don't know their community, your ladder is going to kind of wobble a little. I don't know how many of you have ever seen a ladder that's a two-sided ladder and you lean it up against a building, right? So that's a whole different kind of ladder than the ladders that have four legs. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is at least how to work on one of your legs of your ladder. And so by knowing yourself, you're going to understand your self-awareness. You're going to know your values, what triggers you, your confidence, your leadership style, which is what we're going to talk about today, communication, and those all work together, as well as the ability to make a decision. I don't know about y'all, but man, decision fatigue is real, right? Like I feel like all we do all day is trying to figure out how to make a decision. And is it the right one? Is it the wrong one? What happens if I make the wrong one? All right. And so sometimes we also have workshops that focus on finance. And so if you're ever looking for additional workshops, feel free to make sure you jump on our
Oh,
newsletter.
this is the same lady that did the
And
other one.
yeah, I am the same lady that did the other one, just so you know you weren't muted. And so we do have workshops on business, we have workshops on finance, we do a lot of enrollment and marketing workshops as well. And that continues to help you build that strong foundation. All right. Now, we also want to make sure that everybody gets the ability to understand their program. And sometimes we have folks that come into trainings with us who don't really understand a lot of the compliance pieces or maybe the curriculum pieces. And again, that comes back to knowing that you've got that strong infrastructure in place. And the fourth part of the infrastructure framework is knowing your community, your families, building partnerships within other organizations in the community, market awareness. For some of you, real quick in the chat, drop in the chat the how long you've been in the field and a second number, how long you've worked at the program you've been at or that location. Parents not parenting. All right, 10 years in the field. 7 months ago. Okay. All right. 12 years, same location, 16. All right, 32 years. All right. Well, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these locations that have been here for, a long time. So one of the things that we always have to remember in early learning as early learning leaders is that our communities change. And sometimes what made them great 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 31 years ago, uh, doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad now. It just means that they're different, right? And so we have to remember that it is going to be really important as we're getting to know our community and that we know ourselves, that we do remember that the community makeup changes and what the community needs change. And sometimes for some programs, that's a really hard thing for them to kind of figure out how to move forward on. All right. So, however, today, one of the things that we're going to do is that we are going to talk about decisions and how those decisions are made. And if you are the owner director, there's probably a lot of decisions that flow through you. And sometimes you may not want to have to answer every discussion or every decision, or you just wish that somebody else would make some of the decisions. But the more confident you get as your own leader, your own person, and getting to know yourself, the more confident you're going to come across to the parents, more confident you're going to come across to the staff. It all starts with you. Right. So when I asked, what were some of the things that were kind of overwhelming you today? We had all kinds of responses as from parents to staff call outs. We had a little bit of everything. By the end of today's session, one of the things that you're going to have an idea of, hopefully you'll be able to identify for yourself, is what is it about you that you do really, really well? And what does that mean that you get to bring to the table at your program? What do I mean by that? Is that sometimes if we do something really, really well, we shine, but we may forget that sometimes there are things that we don't do really, really well. So we compensate. So we shine in a whole different color, right? We are a different type of person at that point in time. And so today we're going to talk about the fact that everything flows through you. Everything about leadership is coming through you, but it's also one of these areas. So how well do you communicate? Right? How do you speak and how do you listen? Operations, decisions. How are you under pressure? As an owner director, which I think about now, probably about 50% of you on the call said you were an owner director, maybe even a little higher. How you respond in stressful situations is got to be the most important thing. But you also have to remember, in this particular case, you're one person. And so hopefully you're building a team. You have people that are with you in this journey, but we want to make sure that those expectations for yourself are realistic. We also want to make sure that the parents and the staff have realistic expectations of you. And if we haven't figured out how to communicate and we've got, maybe we're a little not 100% clear on our decisions, or we don't manage our stress the way we should, we know that those relationships that we have with our staff and our parents are not going to be built on solid ground. And that makes it really hard for you to do your job. So hopefully we will be able to give you some insight in having a stronger ladder and making sure that all four legs of your leadership and your building management are all strong. So self-awareness is absolutely leadership infrastructure. This is not a soft skill. Some of you have probably even heard people in the last 6 years use the phrase infrastructure, right? That childcare is the infrastructure for workforce development across the globe, right? This became really evident in 2020. So, you would think that after 6 years, people would remember that. However, it doesn't. I've also shown up to conferences where people are like, oh, that's a soft skill, right? So learning to be nice to people is a soft skill, or changing your mindset. However, I have kind of a slightly different perspective, which is today you are going to be working on your self-awareness. In other words, knowing yourself better. And to me, that is the foundation of everything else you do in your job. Because there are going to be things that you're going to do really, really well, and there are going to be things that you don't do well. And you know what? That is 100% okay. We just have to recognize that these are some things that I'm just not naturally good at, or these are the things I'm naturally good at. And when I get stressed, I overcompensate. All right. So let's chat real quick. I'm trying to move all my boxes. So, how do you lead when you are calm? So, we have all had that time where the week has been great, our staff's been great, the staff or teachers, same thing. Our parents have been great, right? Like things are just on, right? And sometimes it's because things are on in your personal life as well. We can't ever deny that what happens in our personal life doesn't impact what happens every single day in our day job, because that's just how that happens. And one of the things that I like to kind of remind folks is that when you're calm and how you communicate when you're calm, how you make those decisions when you're calm, how people feel when they're around you when you're calm, that's important. That's probably your natural leadership style. This is the version of you that shows up when you feel safe, supported, and clear. But we all know there are other days where that don't fall into that, right? So then there are the days when we're just a little overwhelmed. So if you think about your hardest days, the unexpected licensing visit, the crazy parent that's called you like 14 times before noon, or the staff person who called you and told you you were sick, but forgot that you're friends on social media. At that point in time, your stress leadership pattern, sometimes we don't handle it well, and it often will surprise us. This is why it's so important to just know what your leadership style is and how it's going to show up in your work environment. Because we all are going to have those days, right? It's just gonna happen. I have a little icon that keeps trying to get in the way of my digital buttons. Okay.
Services.com for everything that your doc, your hospital, your pharmacy, everything. 281-894-7540. Drive into savings with all the low rates.
Okay. I thought maybe that person was trying to talk to us. They're like, nope. All right. So the leadership model, it really is just shortened PAEI. It is a leadership model. It is one of a million, right? Like you can find all kinds of books on leadership and workshops on leadership, and everybody's got an assessment or a test. And you know what? Every single one of them is useful as long as you know personally, A, where do you fall in the model, and B, how do you use it? Because if you're not using it, it doesn't really do you any good. And if it's complicated and you can't explain it to everybody on staff, that also is going to be hard for it to be beneficial. So there are four, there's just four parts. Most people are going to find that they gravitate towards two. And I've seen this show up in a couple of different um, assessments. So if you've done other assessments or different personality tests, again, they kind of hopefully they kind of all kind of lead you down the same path because hopefully you're not wearing one assessment and one hat and it looks very different than if you're in doing another one. So most of them do all kind of come together. And if we stop and we have that self-awareness, it is a great opportunity for us to learn and go, okay, here's what I know, here's what I'm missing, and here's what I need to move forward. So we're going to talk about what happens when the pressure's on. So the four ways leaders naturally show up is going to be the P, right, which is the producer, A, administrator, E, entrepreneur, and I, integrator. Every one of these have their pros, their cons, their strengths, their weaknesses. None of them is better than another one. Okay, so I want you to remember that statement. There isn't one combination that's better than another one. There isn't one single one that's better than another one. You can be a producer and an administrator. You can be a producer and an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur and an integrator. When we talk about entrepreneur in this particular capacity, we're talking about it from a leadership style, not whether or not you want or do start a business. Okay. And so when we talk about that today, I just want you to know that that phrase that is used in this particular discussion isn't necessarily about being the owner or an entrepreneur. It is a person, not even really personality. It's a leadership style. Okay. So you're going to show up one of these ways. You are already a leader. This isn't you get to choose to be. You're here and you're in a leadership role. So the PAEI model helps you identify what is your dominant style, as well as figure out, okay, who else on my team? What is their styles? How to lead with intention. And here's the big one, especially when things are hard. Like I said earlier, most of us will have this is who I am. This is my primary style. And then we'll have that secondary style. Some of you might even go, well, I've been doing this job so long, I got all of them. Well, that is probably going to be true on some levels. So as we talk about them, I do want you to think a little bit more about, okay, yeah, I'm definitely that one. Definitely that one. I can do that one, but I don't like it. How many of you, if there is a skill in your job right now that you do okay, but you don't like to do it? Drop that in the chat for me. Tell me what some of those are. What are some of the things that you have to do every day, every week that you just really, you do it well, you just don't like to? Oh, parents. Yeah, there are definitely some parents. Oh, tours. All right. All right. All the administrative work. Okay, well, we're going to come back and talk about that one. Food program, same kind of thing, right? Administrative details, teachers, negotiation. Tell me more about the negotiation. Is that like you feel like you're negotiating with parents, you're negotiating with staff, you're negotiating with the kids because they want more food? Tell me a little bit more about that one. Both, all the above. Okay. All right. Oh, the parents. Yeah. Okay. Well, we kind of need the parents, right? That's, those parents and guardians, how we end up with kids in the program. So we have to have them. Oh, unreasonable expectations. Okay. Yeah. And pretty much anything that looks like accounting. I see that. Okay. There's definitely some of that happening here. All right. So we've talked about the fact that there's pluses, there's minuses, and the whole goal today really is to figure out where do you fit in that circle. Okay. All right. We're going to start. We're going to start with our four. So if you want to take notes, do screenshots, screen grabs, do whatever you need to do, because it absolutely will be one of those things that it's probably going to make you think a little. At least that's the goal. So the first one, the P, the producer, this is the action taker. They move fast, they get things done. They are focused on the outcomes and the delivery. They want things done, reliable, and they're solution oriented. If you are this person, just drop a P. If you're not, it's okay. But if you think you're a P, drop a P in the chat box. I want to know how many of us are around, right? This is the person who will roll up their sleeves. They're going to make things happen. Okay. And it's okay. Again, remember, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? It's um, you know, it is what it is, right? This is the director who steps into the classroom with the chaos, and they will just step in and do it. No real questions no real questions. But here's the thing. So although this is a leadership style that we often see in this role, there it's got its not so positives, right? They take over everything when they're under stress. So when a producer is under stress, their strength becomes their shadow. So instead of empowering others, they take more and more on until they're doing everybody's job. If it's not done right, don't do it, right? The pattern is they jump in before others can even try, and they solve problems that aren't theirs to solve. As a result, you end up with a lot of team turnover. So if you're not sure if you're a producer, so if you were sitting here going, well, I mean, yeah, but I do it because, well, I have to because nobody else does it. Okay. Right. So there's one clue. But the other clue is if you have a pretty significant staff turnover, you might be a producer who's under stress. I know this is not a job that has any stress. Yeah. Okay. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? So, however, in your center, you can spot the producer because they step into the classroom when a teacher is struggling. They answer every parent call personally, and they have that relationship. They will stay late to finish what the team didn't complete. And as long as they're doing something, they feel comfortable. Again, one of the gifts about being a producer or having that leadership style is reliability. Okay. Now, Every one of these roles have the ability to learn and to grow. The best thing for a producer to continue to grow as a leader is to build this same capacity in their staff versus trying to do it all themselves. This is where you see a producer really growing as a leader and really building that team unity is because they've recognized that they're the type of person who wants to do everything. And they have started to learn the skill of delegating. All right. Number two, this is the administrator. You can spot them by their clipboard. They want structure. They want it to be done a specific way, and not only a specific way, but the same way and consistently. They're the one building the systems, but they're also detail oriented, they're organized, and they're reliable. Now, when I was asking y'all what were the things that you don't like to do necessarily in your job, there was somebody who said food program. Well, you know what? If this does not get you excited, so in other words, you don't go, yay, systems, yay, clipboards, or a few three-ring binders, then you need to find yourself the administrator to put on your team. And again, your team doesn't have to be a full-time team. These can be teachers who maybe 2 hours a week or an hour a day, they help you with the food program. They take on a task that requires this kind of regularity in what you're doing. There's a lot of roles as a director that need that person who's the administrator. A lot of the directors I know, this is not their favorite leadership style. It's a skill they've taught themselves, but it isn't what comes naturally to them. They struggle with it. They might be one of those people who have ended up taking every course on systems and they have people to help them and they buy them, but they have a hard time with the implementing. Okay. So if this resonates with you, drop an A in the chat. If you think you might be an A, drop that in the chat for me. In other words, this is what you do well. This gets you excited. Maybe you've got color-coded dust, got filing cabinets and filing folders, and everything's got a folder. It's all got a color. Oh, come on, there's got to be a few more. There's some more. Okay. All right. And if you think that maybe you do it a little bit, just write a little bit down on your piece of paper as you're taking notes. Now, because remember, every one of these leadership roles is going to have some traits that are going to come out when they're stressed. Okay. And so if you are an administrator leadership style and you get under stress, you are going to hold on tight. Okay. To the point of rigidity, right? Like there's no flexibility. It's got to be done at this time and it's got to be done this way. When an administrator is stressed, it really puts a lot of strain on relationships. And, you know, people have words for those people, right? We all have names for that person. And, they add more rules and they get into the micromanagement and they struggle on the days when things don't go the way they're supposed to. And in this industry, there's a lot of those days. We have parents who don't show up on time. We have staff who call out. So those plans are changing. The administrator is a great personality to be in this role. However, they're not very creative and they're not allowing their staff to be creative because they want their staff to follow the rules. And if you notice, just like the last one, under that stress, when things aren't going the way we want it to, that trust erodes, right? The trust has a tendency to disappear. The administrator in your center. And again, like most things, a little bit of everything is always going to make a really great, solid single person. Most of us aren't that. So let's think of it as a solid team. And those teams don't have to be full-time staff. Okay. So the administrator in your center, they've got a binder for everything and they know exactly where the binder is. They like the checklists. They like the daily schedules and compliance trackers. They know where you are. They feel comfortable when there is a clear process to follow. And they get frustrated when people don't follow the systems that they built. Now, their gift is their reliability and their order and their processes and systems. Now, their place to grow. So if you identify with being pretty much an A, the best thing you can do for yourself and for your staff is to learn how to hold that structure, but to be a little flexible. Okay. Especially when it comes to the people, because you're going to have the staff that just has a bad day. You're going to have the parents that are going to have a bad day. And yes, you're going to get overwhelmed because they aren't following the guidelines and they aren't following the rules. But think of this. Give it to yourself as a little bit of homework. Try to figure out what is one thing that maybe you could let go a little bit. Okay. One example of that might be just real quick is if you have a very clear start time as far as when curriculum in your program starts. And maybe you have a family that has got some stuff going on. And so maybe this week you practice the flexibility and you just say to yourself, is it really going to hurt that class if that one child comes in just a little bit late to give that one parent that flexibility? Now, you don't make this decision in a solo, right? Or silo, right? You don't make it all by yourself. You have a conversation with the teachers, especially the kids' teachers. But there might be, especially because it's May, right? So May is its own level of chaos and stress. But this might be a great time for the A's to practice that flexibility. So how can you have structure, but how could you put the flexibility in there? Can that flexibility be related to time? Can it be related to what people pack for their child for lunch? Is there a way to be flexible about, do they have enough diapers? Do they have a change of clothes? What are the things? Now, I'm going to tell you, structure with flexibility has nothing to do with payroll and it has nothing to do with money. So, no, you are not flexible on whether or not they can pay you a week late. No, you are not flexible about, giving people extra hours so they can have overtime or, letting people make up the hours because they've called in sick. Yeah, okay. So there's some things, no flexibility. No, no, no. Okay. The third style is the entrepreneur. Okay, let me go mute. Oh, got themselves muted. Okay. All right. So the entrepreneur, one of the things with the entrepreneur, so a lot of times people think of as an entrepreneur as a type of person who runs a business or starts a business. That can absolutely be the case, but not every entrepreneur or business owner is necessarily a visionary. So in this particular situation, the PAEI, the E being the entrepreneur, is really the visionary. Okay. They are the one that can see all the possibilities even before you do. They got the creative juices just to going and they are constantly coming up with new ideas. And they are energized by growth and by change. This is just the thing that gets them excited. The entrepreneur is the leader who is always thinking about what's next. And in childcare, this is that director who wants to go check out the latest and greatest new curriculum. Or they're constantly like, you'll go home on a weekend and you'll come back on a Monday and they have totally redone your dramatic play. All of a sudden, you have a winter wonderland. Okay, well, we're on this summer. All of a sudden, you have a beach where there used to be a kitchen, right? And they inspire and they get the staff excited to create new ideas. If you think this is you, drop an E in the chat box. Love to know how many entrepreneurs, how many visionaries, how many creatives are here just going, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's my second style. Love that. Absolutely. This is the one that I actually love to spend the most time in. So, some of us might identify, I identify with some that I like, I was raised by that type of personality. So, although I don't identify 100% as an administrator, I was raised by administrators, but I am absolutely a producer. Okay, but my love falls into the E. Okay. Now here's the thing. And those of you who are the visionary, the E, you know this, right? You saw this pop up and you started to chuckle, right? There's a little chuckle of they change directions too fast. Okay. An entrepreneur is that leader who, man, when something doesn't go the way it's supposed to, they go find another route and they go this way and they go that way and they're constantly moving. And for sometimes this means that your staff might be going, whoa, like we barely made last week's change, right? And sometimes it's because they've read a new book, and sometimes it's because they've done something else, right? And they are totally, totally freaking out a little. Now, it becomes a pattern, right? And so this is how you know that they're stressed. But again, when I talked earlier about do you have staff turnover, maybe your staff turnover is because you're this person, right? So if we have staff turnover, a lot of times there is some inconsistency, and part of it, unfortunately, it starts with us, right? As the leadership, if we don't really understand our strengths, our weaknesses, we're not willing to learn, stretch, and grow, then we have to decide if maybe we're still in the right role. And so if you're an entrepreneur and you are all over the place, your staff starts to lose confidence in the plan. They're like, I don't think this is working. Like, where are we going here? Okay. So, real quick, the entrepreneur in your program, they are um, totally, totally, right? Like they are totally on board. They found this new curriculum model, or maybe it's a new pedagogy, right? Like they have a new approach and they are excited to try it and they want the whole school to jump on board. Maybe they get energized at a conference. Okay. If you've gone to a great conference that you think you would love to have more leaders go to, drop that in the chat box because as peers, we need to tell each other about, hey, I went to this great conference, or I went to a great conference last year or 2 years ago. Now, I'm not asking you, how it was paid for or any of that, because that's a whole different thing, but share the conferences that have worked well for you. Even if you weren't an E, maybe you that worked well because, man, they were on target. Because I got a couple of those, right? So as a producer, there are some conferences that totally feed into my producer brain. As an entrepreneur, there are some conferences that I have been to, and I'm like, woohoo! This is awesome! Like all the greatest and latest and greatest. There are some that I've been to that, as an administrator, wow, that is like I've got to be on top of that. Okay. So if we're talking today and a conference pops into your mind that you've been to that you're like, okay, this is where the E's need to go, drop it in the chat. Maybe it's just things that you've heard. Maybe they're a webinar that you got somewhere. Maybe all your training happens just through Texas Rising Star and Texas Workforce Solution situations, which is awesome. But there are some great, great conferences in the state of Texas. We have the Texas Licensed Childcare Association. We have Texas AUYC. Texas AYC also has local and regional chapters, but they both have annual conferences. TLCCA has two conferences a year. Texas AYC has one. And then we've got other organizations and companies that provide great training here in the state of Texas. Okay. Yes. Born to Teach. That is a perfect example of full-blown entrepreneur energy conference. Had been in Houston for 2 years. This year they're going to be in Atlanta. Actually, I think it's in July. I think it's the second weekend in July. But go check out Born to Teach. Absolutely awesome conference. Um, a couple of weeks ago, there was the Child Care Millionaires Conference out of Houston. But TRS does a really good job. So if you really get something out of TRS and you like the TRS conferences, look to see if you have some staff or some potential leaders that maybe could go next year if you've already done yours, if you've gone before. Give those opportunities to some other folks. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna squirrel here. There's my entrepreneur, right? I'm just going, wee, 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 wee. Okay. They also, somebody who is an entrepreneur also reimagines the outdoor space or the lobby, or maybe they've got a new social media strategy or a new way they want to communicate with parents. They're always trying to be creative. Okay. That is their inspiration. They want to inspire. They want to inspire growth in the staff and the children. However, they don't always finish what they start, right? They get about 70% done. And then they kind of lose a little steam. And they have faded fast. They are, they are the engine to the locomotive, and they have no idea where their caboose is because they just cruising right along, and they took a ride at the next fork in the track, and somewhere back there is their caboose, and they have no idea. But it's okay because remember, a lot of us are going to have multiples. We're gonna have a primary and a secondary. A lot of us, I mean, some of you on here have been in the industry as long, if not longer than I have. So, well over 30 years. After a while, there's a lot of these skills you can do, but it doesn't mean you like them. And if you try a skill that you don't like and you get stressed out about it, well, then all those negatives come out because you were stressed. Oops. All right. So let's talk about number 4. Okay. So we've got P, which is the producer, A, which is the administrator, E, which is the entrepreneur, and I, which is the integrator. This is the connector. They build deep trust and loyalty. They have the culture that everybody wants to be a part of, right? This is the program that you see and hear stories about them all doing things and being social and going out and doing things. They've figured out the purpose, the vision and mission in their program, and they not only have figured out how to share it with their staff, they've got everybody to buy in. This is the type of leader that I mean, they're the people who have, like, the staff have worked for them for 30 years, right? Like the staff feel like they've been supported. They know they are cared for. As you can probably see, right? There are parts of this job that you have to have all 4 of those leadership styles. And so I don't know about you, but the first time I read this, I went, well, if I can't do all 4, how am I going to do my job? Well, here's the thing. You're not going to be able to do your all 4. That's just not going to happen, right? So we need to make sure that we figure out what we do well and then figure out how do we find the other pieces. We also have to remember that sometimes those other pieces may not, they may rub us the wrong way. And it doesn't mean that they're not good quality leaders. It's just they're not the same as us, right? Okay, so if you are an I, drop an I in the chat real quick for me. What? No eyes? One eye? Oh, okay. Oh, I love that one. I strive to be an eye. There we go. That now that's probably the most honest one all day. Not that not let me rephrase that 'cause not that I want you to think I didn't think you were being honest. Because this is for those of us who want to be, it's for those of you who are eyes, right? You know, Charlotte's like, I've been an eye, oh, my people have been with me for 12 years, right? Now, I bet there's a secret that Charlotte probably has. Okay. Yeah, I'm with Sarah that this is a hard one for me. But if you're somebody like Charlotte and you know you've got people who've worked with you for 12 years and you know you are 100% an I, there's probably a secret. And that is probably that, well, she probably absolutely hates the details, or she has hired somebody to do the details, right? She has hired herself a producer and an administrator. Now, I could be totally wrong, but traditionally in my experience, if you do the integrator great, there's something that's being left behind and not in a bad way. It just means they've figured it out usually, probably quicker than the rest of us. Because the rest of us are like, look, I got all my I's dotted and my T's crossed and I'm moving everything forward, or everything's just moving all hunky dory. And we kind of forget the other pieces, like all the people. And we got to have all the people, right? You know, without the people, you don't have a program because you got to have the staff people and you got to have the parent people. Okay. So, but I generally find that the eyes are quicker about recognizing that they have to hire done those administrative details, where those of us who do the administrative details, how do we hire out the be nice to people? See, Charlotte figured it out, right? She got a paper person, right? I love that. So, so all right. Hopefully that works a little bit. Hopefully this is starting to make some sense to y'all. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. Um, oops. Okay. Here's the hard part. Traditionally, and again, I'm going to use this in that phrase because not all integrators are this. However, if an integrator is under stress, they will generally avoid the hard conversations. Now, a lot of people avoid hard conversations regardless whether they're an integrator or not, because there's something about being uncomfortable and making other people uncomfortable that nobody gets really excited about. But if you think about that delay in giving that feedback, although it might make it easier for you to put it off a little, it is possible that it's going to cost you staff or cost you money. Now, I'm going to share a story about an integrator who, again, loved working with them. They've got a great program. They have 3 locations. They've got a variety of staff. And this is what I mean by there could be a cost, because in this particular case, it's actually a financial cost. So their enrollment had a dip, and it's a pretty significant dip. And we've all had that scenario at some point in time, probably, right? Where it could be preschool, it could be a new school moving in, and that new school could be public school, right? There's something's changed in your community. I'm sure the program that's been around for over 30 years in the location, we've got somebody on today, there's probably been changes and pattern shifts. And so they needed to let 4 staff go between their 3 locations. and they couldn't do it and they couldn't do it and they couldn't do it. And all of a sudden, now they had to actually take a loan to make payroll. That is a black and white, that had a cost. Not only that, one of the folks that they were putting off letting go was blatantly disrespectful to the director, and the director quit. So now you have a teacher who you should have let go, who now had the power and took away a director that you had hired. So these were the owners. So there's a situation where keeping somebody on staff because you didn't want to have the difficult conversation. And in this case, it wasn't that the person did anything wrong, well, until they were rude. But at the time, it was just they had more staff than they had kids, right? And so if you don't need all the staff, you can't keep them. And so there was a direct financial repercussion, and it started to spiral on them. And so one of the things that we did was had meetings with each group individually. So each classroom, each school, each group of parents. We had a lot of meetings because we needed to have some of these hard conversations as a group, because we needed the parents to kind of open their eyes and look around that, hey, we have like half the number of kids. Um, have any of you ever had a major employer shut down in your community? If you've had a major employer shut down in your community, just put a Y in the box because that's kind of what happened. That's what happened here. And that was really, really hard. Yeah, Teresa. I mean, if you've lost a major employer, like those families, even though they want to stay, keep their kid there, they're not taking their kid out because you're a bad program. But now they got a parent that's not working, and that parent can stay home with their child, or maybe that parent's got to go. I mean, maybe they got to move, right? So sometimes that is the reason. And it does mean that that's a conversation that we have to have with everybody. But again, this integrator, everybody loved them. They loved everybody. They had real deep relationships with their staff. They didn't want to let anybody go. Now, on that same note, I am going to share. Um, there's other ways to do that because sometimes hard conversations, especially if you happen to have an entrepreneur around, you can have an entrepreneur who might bring in a different creative approach. So having the different own, knowing that you yourself might be two different types, but also knowing that you might have a peer or somebody else on your team with one of these other leadership styles. If you have a situation like the one I literally just described, where you've lost some kids, you've got to let some staff go, or you're going to take a loan out for payroll, have a staff meeting and explain to the staff what's going on. And if you let the staff know, hey, as soon as I insert whatever, right? So as soon as I get my 5 kids back, or we get 5 kids back, I can hire some staff back. The scenario that I'm specifically thinking about was a situation where my business partner had a school. She had to reduce payroll by 40 hours. Well, to her, the easiest way to do that was to let somebody go. It wasn't something she wanted to do. So instead, she sat down with the staff, and one of the staff said, hey, well, I can give up a few hours. And another staff person said, hey, you know what? I'll just work mornings. So basically, although there was one person who could only give up 45 minutes a week because of their financial situation, everybody else on staff gave up a couple of hours every day or over the course of the week. And so they were able to reduce the payroll by 40 hours without having to fire anybody. And that is an example of how somebody who is an entrepreneur would deal with a situation that prevented them from having those uncomfortable situations, right? So they didn't have the uncomfortable situation, the hard conversation necessarily. They just did it in a more out of the box way. And so we're going to talk about some other examples of that, maybe. Sorry, I've got this little, here we go. Haha. Okay. All right. So the integrator in your program, this is the director, and this is actually something that this part I actually did designate or delegate to another staff person, which is it's the staff person who remembers everybody's birthday. Now I remember friends' birthdays. I will remember unique things about friends. I can walk down the street and go, ah, so and so is going to love that. But I didn't do that necessarily with my staff. Okay. And so the everybody felt genuinely cared for. This is the director who, instead of just getting a generic, everybody gets a gift card, right? They would be real personal gifts. And they, as a leader, felt connected and thrived with all of their staff. However, their best opportunity for growth is direct conversations. So if I'm making you a little uncomfortable, telling you that you need to have some direct conversations, you might identify as an I. Okay. All right. All right. So I want you to think about everything that we've just talked about. Here is what the four styles are, right? We've got producer, they're action oriented, results, they get it done, administrator, entrepreneur, and integrator. So if I could get you to do me a favor, think through these, and I'd love to see 37 responses. Give me if you think you're only one, give me the one you think you are. If you think you are two, give me that blend. Now, I don't want you giving me four because that's not a blend. I can't make a decision. All right. I'm just reading everybody's. All right. We got some E's, we got some I's, we got some P's and E's, more P's and E's. All right. Now, I kind of want you guys to tell me which is the one that for you personally feels like the hardest. Like you just look at this list and you're like, oh, I so am not that person. One thing about an administrator, sometimes administrators are it's got to be perfect before it'll get done. Okay. All right. All right. Well, so just so you guys know, this is actually pretty common. So, what I've noticed is that a lot of y'all are identifying that administrator is the one that's the hardest for you. And that is pretty common in our industry. And it really which is interesting considering how regulated of an industry we are, right? And so that's probably where um, so, well, I mean, Charlotte, delegating it is exactly an alternative with every single one of these, right? Like sometimes we do it because, well, we have to, right? We don't have an option. But delegating, even if it's only a little bit or some things, like you may not delegate everything that's administrative, but you may have some things. So, for example, I want you to drop in the chat if you have somebody on staff who every day or once a week they're in charge of doing the playground inspection. In other words, you've delegated one person to the playground. And You can go find me some little gif of somebody on a swing. You can just drop a P, okay, the bus driver. Oh, that's a great role for them, right? Great little add-on, right? Because bus drivers already have to do all the transportation checklists, right? Give them another checklist, right? Assistant director, okay. Administrative assistant, okay. So, yeah, okay. So that is a great example of you're the person. Okay. So here's the thing. This is a great beginning task to practice the delegating because it probably is absolutely a checklist. If not, there are great ways and great places to find them. If you don't know, I am part of a podcast duo. So, Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie is a podcast for directors. We've got about 350 episodes. You can find on any of the podcast apps. And we have one of our second highest episode, listen to episode is one on playground safety. Um, so that might be, and there's a checklist in the show notes. And so if you are looking for a way to delegate to a teacher, this is a way to do that because um, we got to practice somewhere, right? And so if we try to do it all ourselves, we're never going to get to where we need to go. And so my suggestion always is going to be find little things that you can delegate, and it can be closing checklist, opening checklist, playgrounds. Okay. Now, there are also tools. Every single one of these have digital tools. Every single one of these have paper tools that can help you as well. Okay. All right. So here's the next question. Which one of these shows up when you're stressed? Who knows? Because remember, most of us were a blend. Okay. And if we can at least name it, right, it makes it so much easier. Okay. Yeah, I see a lot of y'all. My friends are in the house. Uh, so Sheila's our E. So when Sheila gets stressed out, so Sheila, when you get stressed out, are you one of those people who like you start wanting to change everything? Like you just start going, let's do this. All kinds of fresh ideas. All right. So since a lot of us everything, I love it, Sheila. Maybe that's what the E stands for with you, right? Like you're the E for everything. Love that. Um, oh, okay. So Esther, when you get stressed, you take on the we're gonna micromanage and make it tighter and stronger. You know what? Really, here's the thing. Just the fact that you've been able to put a label on it and you've been able to identify to yourself that, ooh, okay, so when I'm stressed, I'm gonna control everything or I'm gonna do everything, right? So the producer just does it all, right? They're the, oh, just go home, I'll clean it myself, right? Because you're not doing it right. Okay, that's the producer. Okay, and the administrator goes, no, everybody's going to do it this way and only this way. Like nobody, like we all are going to, do things this way, and you're all over everybody, right? The entrepreneur, they are just, let's try this, let's try this. Like they're literally throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. Okay. Now the integrator, now, so I noticed that I didn't see anybody pop up as an I, right? Which style is under stress? But the example I gave you earlier, as far as the true financial cost of being an I, that was what was happening, right? There was a lot of stress in that program. And because of all of the stress, they avoided the harder conversations even more. So being able to put the name on it means that you now have a choice. That is the true definition of a leader is that you are making decisions intentionally. You are making them by choice, right? This is not, oh, I'm just going to do it because. Okay. Most of us are some blend. Okay. So you can find yourself. on here somewhere. Um, if you are all, if just because we're E's doesn't mean that an EI is going to be the same as an EA versus a PE, right? There's going to be a little bit of everything, right? This is probably one of my favorite graphics if you wanted to snap a picture to try to explain to somebody else. And if you do find yourself in a situation where you're excited about this, or you're like, one light bulb popped on, doesn't have to be 2 hours worth of a light bulb, it could be one. And you want to share this with somebody, at the end of the slide deck, you will get my email address. Feel free to email me and go, hey, Kate, can you send me a couple of slides about the PAEI model? You can also look up the PAEI model on Google. You're going to find um, the psychiatrist who created that model, who still teaches that model. It's only been around since the 70s, so he's still around. He still teaches it. He's got whole institutes and whatever. Okay. Now, I want you to put on your little hat, right? You got a letter on your hat. You got a P and A and E and I. Okay, there's a letter on your hat. You now have the responsibility of changing your communication. Why do I say it's a responsibility? Well, you now know and you've been exposed. And so again, this is the foundation level, right? So we need to use that foundation level. We need to use that information. So if we know that we are more of a producer or more of an integrator, or we avoid hard decisions, every conversation you have is now primed for the opportunity to be intentional. You have the ability to do a purposeful conversation with every staff person, a purposeful conversation with every parent, even if you aren't an integrator, right? Even if you're not one of those people where that just comes naturally. One of the most important parts in this job is that ability to have conversations with parents or with staff. So for those of you who found yourself comfortably in a P or an E or an A, use that to your strength, but do it in a way that now creates tools for you related to having real conversations. It could be a checklist that is just a reminder for you to have a 10-minute conversation, an intentional conversation with every staff person every week. That helps your little A mind, right? Your little administrative mind with a checklist learn and adapt and integrate and bring that into being a little more of an integrator. The producer, the same thing, right? Make it a point to do it and just say it's going to get done, because you'll do it and you may do it differently. You may not have a checklist, but if you just said, I'm going to do this, you are now going to do this. Now, our entrepreneur is probably going to have very different conversations with every single person. But if they see the vision related to the communicating with their staff, those E's, those of us who have some E tendencies, we need to think even more about our intentional communication, because we need to acknowledge that perhaps we've been a little stressed and things have been a little all over the place. One of the best things that we can do as leaders, especially now that we know this about ourselves, is to take the next month. Now, May has been a little chaotic, right? Let's be honest, right? And June is going to get a little better. So we got to do it in June, because if we wait till July, July just gets crazy. August is all the back to school, and then we never get around to getting it done. But take the time the rest of this week, so tomorrow and the Friday, take the time to make a list or whatever you need to do to be able to go, okay, I'm going to do this with every staff person and every parent. And then start to give yourself little micro goals. and be excited when you get some of them done. But make it a goal to have a conversation with every parent and every staff person between now and the end of June and listen. This isn't about talking to them. It's not about telling them. It's about listening to them. Because the best way you can be the best leader you can be and really have that confidence of, I got this, is by listening to what other people are saying and then figure out what's your role. Okay. Where is the disconnect? If you're an integrator and you got a bunch of staff who are producers or a bunch of parents who are producers, there may be things that are just like, it's just not working. But you may not know that they've got problems with some things because you're too chatty and they're trying to get out the door. Right. So think about every conversation with every parent and every staff person. Now, those of you who are administrators, do not make, don't take any more than 2 days to plan out what you're going to do. This is not about a perfection. This is about a doing. Okay. The producers, y'all already got your list. You already know what you're going to do, and you've already decided who's making the phone calls. You've probably already blocked on your calendar, and this has been a 2-minute conversation about this topic, but there's probably already a block in your calendar of, make arrangements to have parent calls. Okay. Now, here are the types of questions that you need to remember to ask. And remember that every conversation needs to start looking more intentional, whatever that means for you and your leadership style. Okay. Some of you are going to probably take notes. Some of you aren't. Some of you might even write out what you're going to talk about ahead of time. Some of you are just going to freewheel it. Any one of those is okay. It's about doing it. The producer, you're going to be inclined to ask what needs to get done. This is, if you're not really sure what your leadership team is, if you've got a leadership team, which includes assistant directors, executive assistants, administrative assistants, curriculum coordinators, all those roles, listen to the questions they ask you. What do you need me to do? What needs to get done? Okay, that's a producer, right? That's who that's talking to, right? How do you want it done? Right? What's the process? That's your administrators. Now the entrepreneur is going to be like, what else could we do? And that made all of the P's and A's hearts just start to, oh, not again. Okay. And the integrators wanting to know how everybody's feeling, right? For example, at the end of a weekend. So, we're about to embark on a 4-day weekend and or 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend, 3-day weekend. And on Tuesday, you're going to have people who are going to be like, hey, what'd you do this weekend? That's the producer asking that question. All right. The integrator wants to know, how are they feeling? Right. Somebody else might go, hey, did the weekend go the way you wanted it to go? Right. That's the administrator. Okay. You know, so those are the kinds of things. That's what I mean by learning to be intentionally and knowing which question that moment needs. You're not going to ask these questions all the time. You're not going to ask them to everybody, but you can also look at these questions and go, that's the type of vocabulary a producer uses, right? Is this making some sense? If this is clicking and you don't have any major questions, just say, yep, just write a yes in the box. If there's a no or you have a major question, go ahead and drop that now. Yeah, just trying to stay on time. So, all right. Well, and again, if you guys ever do have questions, please, hopefully you know that you're welcome to drop those in the chat. Okay. All right. Now, let's just think about this scenario because we've all had it. Every single one of us have had that teacher who did not turn in the lesson plans or whatever your process is, right? How you handle it entirely depends on your style. A producer, that's me, right? I need those plans by Friday. No exceptions. Okay. However, I didn't tell the teacher why I needed them, just that I did and when. Okay. The administrator is all about the process, right? Here's the policy, here's the form, here's the deadline. Might feel a little cold, right? These are the people that feel a little prickly even. Okay. You know, what if we tried a new format? Okay. But we're still avoiding the real issue, right? The fact that they haven't turned it in, right? The entrepreneur, you know, maybe the entrepreneur, do I have anybody here? Do you know Amy's ice cream? Type in the word Amy if you know Amy's ice cream. Do you have any more Amy's ice cream, folks? I absolutely love an Amy's. Well, this is how you know that this was obviously a creative organization. So one person knows Amy's ice cream. Okay. I thought they were all the way down to Houston. Maybe they are just Central Texas. Okay. How about Cold Stone Creamery or Marble Slab? Are those ice cream? The ice creams where they push stuff into other ice cream. Like you might start with Cold Stone. Okay. Okay. All right. So in Austin, Texas, there is an ice cream shop called Amy's Ice Cream, and this was how they used to handle their job applications. If you came in and wanted to apply for a job, they literally gave you a plain white lunch sack, no instructions. Right? Might be an entrepreneur, might be a visionary, right? So the teacher not turning in plans, the entrepreneur is going to try to figure out how could we make it easier for that teacher to turn in the plans. Now, the integrator is going to have a conversation, right? They want to know. They want to be there to support you. Okay. They're caring, but the teacher's still not doing the job by the deadline. Okay. So, in the producer situation where they are clear, but they're not answering the why, one of the things that you would want to do as an identified producer is start to practice, right? That's that whole conversations being intentional. You want to practice explaining why you need those. Okay. The administrator is telling you, here's the policy, here's the form. They're telling you all the hows, but they're not telling you the why. The entrepreneur is still going to do whatever they can, but they're still also not going to tell you the why. Where the integrator still isn't going to tell you the why, but they want to know why you're not doing it, right? Is everything okay? So the one thing that all four of these have done is although they have given the instructions, they haven't backed that instruction with any information. So if there is a reason why lesson plans are due on a specific day, then tell your staff. Your staff are smart people. You hired them because they were smart people. So, for example, if the parents, if the teachers need to turn in lesson plans by a specific day, and part of their lesson plan includes a material list, do you need that a week in advance? Do you need that on the Wednesday in advance? And is it so that you can order materials or so that materials can be gathered? That might be the exact missing piece that that teacher needs to know. Could be. Maybe it's because you have to give it to a whole other human. We've got a curriculum coordinator on here, and everybody uses that role slightly different. So I don't know how that particular person does that job. But let's just say you're the curriculum coordinator who part of your job is not only getting all of the materials, but it's also communicating with the parents. You send out something on the communication app. Well, if that's part of your role, then the director trying to get that lesson plan isn't just between the teacher and the director. It also now includes other people, right? It includes the people who use that information for other stuff, ordering supplies, gathering supplies, sharing with parents. So it's no longer a two-person issue. It's more than a two-person issue. And that's when it starts to involve the whole team. And that's where it's really important for us to kind of understand what kind of person am I? Who else is on my team? And does somebody else in my team have that missing letter? Maybe that person with the missing letter can help me be aware of what I'm missing. Okay. Now, we all know that sometimes we cannot be clear. If you have a teenager or have ever had a teenager, the teenager has made that very clear to you that they did not understand. Doesn't matter. Most of us probably have had a significant other at some point in time that might also say the same thing, that we were not clear in our expectation. But you can be clear in your expectation. You can care about the person. What needs to happen all across the board are more conversations that are intentional, intentionally planned out with both this is why we're having a conversation. Here's the goal of that conversation, right? Here's the expectation following it. Most of you, at some point in time in your life in an English class, somebody told you that everything should have a who, what, where, when, why, and how. And do you know what? As leaders, we probably forget most of that. So if you sit down and you think about having an intentional conversation with a staff person because they aren't doing something the way you want them to do it, or they aren't following the timeline, or they seem a little annoyed because you keep changing the subjects, or you came into their room and messed up stuff, whatever it is, sit down and think about who, what, where, when, why, and how. And have you included all those pieces and parts in your intentional conversation? Okay. We aren't half a person. They aren't half a person. But if we look at the whole picture, we gave them the who, what, when, why, and how, then we know that we're all going to be able to move whatever that issue is forward. Okay. Now, hopefully, this hasn't happened to you more than you want to admit, but most of us probably way more than we want to admit. And that is when all of this hits at once, right? The teacher calls out and there's no subs available, right? Now you're the sub. Or the classroom is short-staffed and now you've got to report yourself. Or you came in as the director and because you weren't the opener, so you came in at 8 o'clock and there was a parent waiting for you. Only wants to talk to you. Okay. Or maybe you got a classroom that because you're short-staffed is about to be over ratio. Okay. This is who you are, who shows up. Okay. If you jump into that classroom, you're the producer. Okay. If you're the administrator, you are quickly the one trying to figure out, well, if I move this 2-year-old over here to the toddler room, or if I move this 3 up to the 4's room for today, we can stay in ratio. Okay. What your leadership style shows up when you're stressed, and it shows up in the what you do first and why. Okay. If you are the integrator, you're probably on the phone trying to figure out why that teacher called out. You're there having those long conversations with the parent, right? You have a very different approach than the administrator or the producer or even the integrator. And you know what? Again, none of those are wrong, right? The integrator is not going to call the person who called in sick, and this is the 4th time they've called in sick in 2 weeks, but they should, right? That's a difficult conversation that needs to happen. Okay. And they need to understand the why, right? So as an integrator, understanding the why, and here's the secret. Your staff don't need to know the why about you. The staff don't need to know the why about the finances or the parents. But if you can help your staff understand the why as it relates to the children, that's why they're there. It's why you're there. I bet if I asked you, why are you in childcare? I'm guessing out of the 37 of us on the call, because I know I would be one of them, that probably 30 of us at least probably got into the field because we had kids. Okay. So if you get into the industry, if you get into early childhood because you had young children, then start to think about every time you try to give a why from the point of view of the children. Why do the children need you to be at work every day? The children need to trust you. If you say, hey, I'll see you tomorrow, and then you don't show up, they don't trust you. They don't understand why you're not there. You told them you were going to be there. And then when you come the next time, well, they're chaotic because they're poking the button. They don't trust you anymore. If you help your staff person understand that, that huge why benefits you and your staff person and the kids in that classroom and ultimately the parents, right? So think about your whys and what are your whys as they relate to the actual children in your program. Am I leading the situation or am I relieving the pressure of the moment? Are you reacting, or are you responding? One, it's because you're uncomfortable. The other one is because you've made a choice. This is the whole purpose of the last hour and 45 minutes is where do you stand? What makes you uncomfortable? What are you willing to change to lead your team better? And again, it could just be the fact that now you're aware. It may not be that you got any grand aha moments today, but now you have a vocabulary. You have a shared vocabulary. You have a word that you can identify. And you have, maybe some hints of ways to make that work. So, clear expectations create the clarity, right? If you give clear expectations, there's no room for confusion. But you have to remember that not all of us are auditory learners. So if all you do is tell me the clear expectation and you haven't handed me something, I may forget because I'm a visual learner. If I'm a kinesthetic learner, I may need something else. I may need a fidget toy. I may need a post-it note. I may need to write it down myself. So remember that those clear expectations still need to come with some learning styles. That's part of that whole know yourself. But when you're giving clear expectations, what needs to happen? Why does it matter? What does it look like? And how do we follow up? Who, what, where, when, why, and how? Okay. Every single time, do this. Take a picture of this. Get the phones out, snap some photos, because if we can give the clear expectations to the parents or clear expectations to the staff, everything. This whole framework needs to live inside your employee handbook because what's the point of telling them what needs to happen if you don't tell them why it matters and you don't tell them how you follow up? What's the accountability piece? I've seen parent handbooks that just say when tuition is due. Doesn't tell you why, doesn't tell you if there's a consequence. Do you have the accountability piece or the consequence for every single policy you have? Don't have that in there, what's the point of having the policy to begin with? And you can't just say, because I told you so. Right? This isn't one of those situations, right? You have to make sure that you understand what that looks like. Now, your employee handbooks, you might even want the success piece, like this is what this looks like if we are successful. Okay. This might be, again, another one of those things you might want to take a screenshot of, right? Lesson plans due Friday at noon. Okay. What needs to happen? Lesson plans are submitted to the shared drive every Friday by 12 o'clock. Why does it matter? Okay. Review support planning before the week begins, prepared. Okay. So that the children get an intentional learning experience. Okay. A completed template in the shared folders with activities, materials, learning objectives filled in for each day. That's what you're looking for. Okay. And finally, how are we going to follow up? Okay. Now, what we don't have here is what happens if the plans aren't submitted. Okay. For example, if you are a program that gives your teachers an hour of planning time, and so you're paying them an hour a week for planning time, but yet they're not getting their plans done. And so then you have to have them go do it at another time. So now you're paying them for 2 hours. That doesn't quite seem right, does it to you? Okay. So have the discussion with them about the fact that they have that lesson planning hour and what you expect to get out of that lesson planning hour. Okay. The clearer you are, the more confident you're going to be because everybody's going to know the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how, right? When your team knows exactly what is expected and why, they don't have to guess, right? They can just focus on being intentional with the children, being and building those intentional relationships with the parents, okay? And manage the confusion, okay? All right, so here you go. There's no wrong or right answers here. This is a snapshot for you. You need your own leadership blueprint. Because again, we've talked about how there's all these tools all over the globe, literally, right? As far as this personality or this letter or this number or this jewel or color, right? I've seen them all. Okay. So as you are kind of wrapping up today, and you're going to have some QR codes, and I know you all are excited about that, but I want you to think about where you are right now. So what is your style? This is for you, and put on a post-it note. You can put letters, however it works for you. But remember, you have to name things, right? So the first thing I want you to name is what is your style? What was your leadership style that we talked about? Okay. Are you a P, an A, an E, or an I? And then what are your patterns? What do you do well and where do you get stuck? And then the third part of your blueprint, because remember, blueprints are used to build things, and we are currently starting your blueprint to build a solid leadership foundation. Just being able to identify it, just being able to figure out the pictures, that could look like a bunch of squares and triangles on a piece of paper, right? Now, what I want you to do is what's the next step? And I want you to write this down. Okay. All right. My kinesthetic learners, you guys need to write this down. Okay. My visual learners, you need to see it. If I've got some auditory learners on here, once you write it down and you're looking at it, say it out loud and say it out loud into a voice note on your phone and then listen to it. Okay. What is the one thing that you're going to do lift differently after today? And you can't just say, have intentional conversations. At least give me something a little more concrete. Help you help yourself. Okay. What do you do naturally well as a leader? What do people come to you for? What does your team count on you for? Think about your best leadership moments. What made that work? If somebody was going to ask your staff about you, what would your staff say? Your leadership strength as it relates to being a producer, an administrator, an entrepreneur, or an integrator. How can you bring that natural style to your center? If you're sitting here thinking, oh my, we have a bunch of P's and A's on staff and we have no I's. The next time you go to hire or promote within the organization, go find yourself and make sure you got yourself a solid I. It could be that you already know exactly who on staff. So make them in charge of parties. Maybe that's the mini step that you can take this week. You can have a party princess. It is okay. All right, next part of your blueprint. What is your stress patterns? Because again, we talked about being able to identify and put words into it. Okay. What are your hardest leadership moments? And we talked about that early on today. But now that you know your PAI stress shadow, what needs to change? If you always do everything for everybody, is that going to change anything? Is that really going to help anything or just help at the moment? I think we all know the answer, right? So what are you going to do differently? What's one thing? I'm not asking you to solve all of them. I'm not asking you to change everything today. But if the pattern keeps showing up, what's going to happen? Are you going to lose staff? Are you going to lose parents? What's going to happen? Step three, right? In building this blueprint is my next leadership step. Okay. Need to be specific, not be a better communicator. But over the next 6 weeks, I'm going to have a one-on-one with each one of my teachers. How does that connect to your PAEI style? Do you know you come across a little cold, a little prickly? Okay. If so, what do you need to ask everybody? What is going to be your softening moment? This is your blueprint, right? You've sat here almost through 2 hours with me. Most of the time you don't jump on these things because you just wanted to hang out with me, right? And I don't want you to hang out with me just to hang out with me. I want you to get something out of it and make this useful for you. Okay. We've talked about this a couple of times, right? That pressure really does reveal itself through patterns. Okay. So every pattern you recognize is a pattern you can change. Okay. If I could give you one gift today, it is that gift of self-knowledge, of self-awareness, and that is the whole goal through this session. Okay. I am not asking you to become a different person. I'm not asking you to become a different leader, but you need to understand how you already lead and know that, remember, it doesn't matter if you're a P, an A, an E, or an I, there's nothing wrong with you. But is that the foundation that your program currently needs, that your parents currently need? How do you show up? Because we want to make sure that you've got this. Okay. Now, if you are on your phone, you can screenshot there's going to be two QR codes. Okay. So the first QR code is for you to tell me exactly what you thought of today's session, right? That's also got my email address. So this is probably one a lot of you want to take that screenshot of. Okay. My email address is kate@texasdirector.org.org. This Taka.QR code, again, allows you to tell me what you're thinking, how did it work for you? Um, so real quick, unrelated. I have somebody who's trying to get into trying to get into the class. And of course, the class is basically over. If anybody is on and you know that your boss or a peer or somebody you know was here earlier and got kicked off and hasn't been able to get back in, will you drop in the chat either their first name, last name, or send a message to me just as a direct message in the chat. Because if this person's been here the whole time, I don't mind letting them in. But if they show up the last 5 minutes, I'm not going to let them in. So, all right, thanks. So anyway, so here is the QR code for you to tell me what you think, and this helps me get better. It's part of the reason why I've added different slides, more slides, and some of those kinds of things as I've continued to do more of these Zoom webinars for Gulf Coast. And then, of course, the QR code that y'all want, right? Remember that this QR code is for your survey that you have to fill out if you want to get your certificate from the Workforce Board. Remember, I can't help you. Don't email kate@texasdirector.org and go, "Where's my certificate?" Now, I want you guys to remember, it takes 48, everybody has 48 hours to fill this out. It is a holiday weekend. If you have not heard from her by next Friday, okay, reach out to her and say, hey, you know, absolutely. Can I put the link in the chat? Oh, yes. Wait, hang on. Let me do that. Or if anybody else gets to it before me, I am not insulted if somebody else went to the link and got there before I did. Because for whatever, there we go. Like for whatever reason, I'm not able to get to it. Okay. All right. So I am going to stop sharing. Hello, everybody. Link in the chat. Link in the chat. Woo! Okay. Um, so this is the second of the two QR codes. That first one, like I said before, helps me. This is the one that you need to fill out for the Texas Workforce Board. Um, the Texas Workforce Board, or for Gulf Coast Workforce Board, needs this particular QR code that's currently on the screen. I've put the link to it in the chat. You have 48 hours. Please do not message them this Friday in 2 days and say, hey, I haven't gotten my certificate. Remember, they give everybody 48 hours to fill out their certificate. In that case, it'll then be a weekend. It is a holiday weekend, which means that nobody will be in the office until Tuesday. It'll probably be Wednesday or Thursday that they're processing. So if next Friday, okay, the 29th, you do not have your certificate, then email childcare trainings at workforcesolutions.net, I think it is. Okay. Um, but whoever you got the confirmation for this event, reach out to them. I can't help you. Okay. I love getting to know y'all. If you guys have questions, absolutely make sure that you email me. If you have not already done the other QR code or you didn't get to it in time, this is what they call a Takadot. This is an opportunity for you to leave me a review. Let me know what you think, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like more of. My email address is here also. So if there are questions you have or content you would like to, possibly use in another fashion, you can absolutely get this. This entire workshop was based off of the book, I Got This, a Childcare Leadership Blueprint. And you can also find a lot of this content in From Overwhelmed to I Got This. Those are two of the books that Carrie Casey and myself, both of us with TexasDirector.org, have written. You can find those on Amazon. And so if you have any questions, you can drop those in the chat. But other than that, I am going to give you all back your last 12 minutes. I will stay on if there are some questions that folks want to answer. But other than that, it has been great to spend my afternoon with y'all and go grab some lunch and finish building out your blueprint. And hopefully you guys have a great holiday. As a former military spouse for over 24 years, I would be remiss to just remind you that it is not Veterans Day. So Memorial Day definitely has a very different purpose. And if you get a chance to just take some time to do those remembrances, you can. So, all right. Well, you all have a wonderful week. And with that, I am going to let you go. All right. Enjoy your time.